Coming up on Need to Know, a new Supreme Court nominee, changes in immigration policy, and a hiring freeze in the federal government. It's been a busy first 2 weeks in office for President Donald Trump. Area Republican leaders join us to share their thoughts on the Trump presidency thus far, in addition to local political issues. Also on the show, from refugee to U.S. citizen, a Rochester man helping immigrants resettle in our region shares his perspective on the American dream, and if it's now a dream deferred. And what's in store for cybersecurity this year? Experts are making predictions on cyber threats that could have a broad impact, what you need to be aware of, and how to protect yourself later on the program. Don't go anywhere. Need to Know starts right now. President Donald Trump has said there's much work to be done in our nation, and he's wasted little time jumping in and rolling up his sleeves. From signing off on a controversial immigration policy, withdrawing from the Trans-Pacific Partnership deal, clearing the way for 2 oil pipelines to be constructed, and making plans for his much-discussed U.S.-Mexico border wall, the 45th president is using the power of executive orders to deliver on some of his campaign promises. Those quick actions are drawing mixed reactions. So how do local Republican leaders feel about the president's first days in office? Joining me to discuss that and much more is New York State Assembly Minority Leader Brian Kolb and Chairman of the Monroe County Republican Committee, Bill Reilich. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
So a lot to cover on a short period of time. So I'd like to begin with your initial reactions on President Trump's first 2 weeks in office thus far. Leader Kolb, more or less what you expected, or any surprises for you?
Well, I don't think there's any surprises, and I don't think there should be surprises for the American people, because President Trump is doing exactly what he said he was going to do, which I think should be a rarity, especially in Washington politics, where people will promise things on the campaign trail and change their mind for a variety of reasons once they get into office. So actually, I think there shouldn't be a surprise to anyone in terms of the specific actions he's been taking so far.
Chairman Reilich.
Well, you know, he comes from the business world. I was in the business for 28 years, and the difference between the business world and government is in the business world things can move fast. In government, typically they move a little slower. He's used to that business world, and we're seeing him. It's a whirlwind, and he's, as the leader said, he's honoring his commitments. Certainly some people support them, some people don't, but the fact of the matter, there's no surprises here. He said what he was going to do when he was in office, and he's doing it in a rather rapid manner, and I don't think people in government are used to working this fast.
I know recent U.S. presidents, they've entered the Oval Office, and immediately they've gotten to work on policy changes. So you mentioned this whirlwind of executive orders. It's not abnormal, but it's the wording for some of them in particular that's been a bit fearful, caused fear among some Americans. In particular, I'm talking about blocking of refugees and visitors from high terrorism risk countries. And that has caused some confusion and some uproar. A recent Reuters poll shows that 49% of Americans agree with that executive order. 41% do not. Where do both of you stand on that issue, and why?
Well, you know, I appreciate your presentation of the issue, because so often I've heard on the news and many channels, not just one, where they talk about a Muslim ban. It really is not that. These are countries that were identified by President Obama and going back to President Bush. The fact of the matter is these are the countries that are under suspicion of harboring and training a terrorist. It's not Muslim, because the countries with the largest Muslim population are Indonesia and India. So it's somewhere around 80% of the Muslim countries are not affected by this temporary hold, and it's only 120 days. And it's what he said he wanted to do. He wanted to get a better vetting system in place, and hopefully he'll be able to do that in that time frame. He's laid out every 30 days benchmarks that the people responsible for delivering this have to meet, so he knows they're moving toward the goal of having a successful way to screen people. It's very difficult. Some of those countries, Somalia, I mean, there's no real government there. Some of these countries, it's very challenging to figure out, what this individual that wants to come into our country is all about. It's something we're not used to dealing with, certainly in my lifetime.
For viewers that are watching right now in Honeoye, the city of Rochester, Greece, and so on, and they're saying, and as you mentioned, the president said this is not a Muslim ban, but they're saying we hear that, but we hear some other elected officials calling it that very thing. They're calling it a Muslim ban. What would you say to those who are watching and they're concerned by the use of that terminology and what this could mean?
Well, I think first and foremost, the toughest part is that there's all this misinformation out there in the world. Fake blogs, fake news, as they call it, distortion of certain policies. I think there was clearly some confusion as how to roll out the logistics at the different airports and entry points in the United States. But ultimately, I think what you really have to do is take a step back. And I think there's still so much emotion left over from the election. There's a lot of people that did not vote for Donald Trump, don't want Donald Trump to be president. And I think they look for every opportunity to try to say, see what we told you, here's chaos, here's a bad move. So there's a lot of people that are really hell-bent on trying to beat up the president just because they didn't support him.
I spoke earlier this week with Ontario County Republican Chairwoman Tricia Turner, and she told me that the president is doing, as you said, exactly what he said he should do. So it should be no surprise what we're seeing roll out. But she said what's being shown, she believes, in terms of some mainstream media outlets, is a misperception. She said what the president is not doing is being divisive. She said it's different. It's a different vision for the country than what President Obama had. And she said she felt as though some of the things being projected, and you mentioned fake news and that kind of thing, are creating some inaccuracies. Why do you think, in your opinion, there's this gap between mainstream media and the president when it comes to coverage?
Well, individuals choose what stations to watch. Obviously, anyone would tell you that Fox leans to the right and CNN leans to the left. So if you only watch one station all the time, you only get that one perspective. And just last night, I flipped between the different channels to see the different perspectives and how it's being presented. I watched CNN from around 5 to 10 till a quarter to 11. The whole time they were on, except for a 5-minute segment, was talking about Donald Trump had harsh words with the Prime Minister of Australia. That was for 45 minutes. They were talking about a phone call that they really didn't have firsthand knowledge on. And only 5 minutes on the disruption at Berkeley. Why? Because that didn't play in their perspective well. I turned on Fox, and the whole time they were showing, in Berkeley, University of Berkeley, where they're burning a cart and the students are throwing things, breaking windows, because a conservative speaker was going to speak. So in essence, they shut down free speech, and he never spoke. The college was trying to bring some diversity to the atmosphere by having a conservative guest speaker. So my point is, it's not always that they take a story and look at it differently. Sometimes it's what stories do they cover. 45 minutes on supposedly a phone call where the president had some firm words with the Prime Minister of Australia. I don't even know how you talk 45 minutes on such a simple subject. But so if you only watch one station, you're only getting one perspective.
It's a long-time ally that so much time was spent on that conversation with Australia?
Well, when you don't know what the conversation really consisted of, other than you heard there were some harsh words, we don't know what it was all about. I know one of the issues they were reporting is that the Prime Minister wanted the United States to honor taking 1,250 refugees, and with the latest developments, the president wasn't going to do that. But again, it's what you choose and how you present it will give your listeners a perspective. Instead of trying to go down the middle and report the facts, I think sometimes the media is trying to manipulate the population to their perspective instead of just straight on facts. And it's done on both sides.
When we look at, I think 18 executive orders, actions as of this point, as of this taping, I should say, on Thursday morning. When we look at those things, what would you say, is there one particular executive order, Leader Cole, that you would say, I think if this plays out as it's been laid out, that this will have a great impact on New Yorkers?
Well, that's a great question. I haven't really thought of it in that terms. I was thinking more on the national level.
And you can go national.
But certainly I think the concept where President Trump is saying we have to reduce regulations for small business and for businesses in general, which is about stimulating the economy. There's no doubt right here in New York State we have an overabundance of regulations, tax, fine, and harass attitude by state agencies that don't look at businesses as job creators. They just look at them as a revenue source. And certainly I think President Trump's sending a signal that we are concerned about the regulatory environment. We need to move forward. We need to create more well-paying jobs in this country. And I think that can have an impact on New York State, especially any federal regulations that may spill over into our state as well.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what Leader Kolb has said, I remember when our region was a manufacturing hub, whether it was Kodak or Xerox, Bausch & Lomb, Gleason's, all the tool and die shops that were supported and spun off as a result of these major industries. And that manufacturing is almost gone. And the president has made a commitment to bring back good-paying manufacturing jobs, basically middle-class jobs, to recreate the middle class that everyone agrees is shrinking. This is the way to bring back the middle class. And you know, I'm not saying every problem is solved that way, but a lot of problems are diminished when people have good-paying jobs, they can put food on the table and support their families.
Right. Well, I appreciate both of you being here. We have to wrap for now. We had a discussion on the show a couple weeks ago about the women's marches that were taking place around the country, and we did receive some concerns from viewers, and they said we'd like to hear the other perspective, the other side. So thank you both for taking the time to be here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So Bill Reilich, chairman of the Monroe County Republican Committee, and Brian Kolb, New York State Assembly Minority Leader. We thank you for your time. And please stay tuned to WXXI News on television, radio, and online at WXXInews.org for ongoing coverage of President Donald Trump's first 100 days in office. While some support the president's most recent actions, there are others who say they are confused and fearful. In particular, I'm talking about those impacted by President Trump's executive orders pertaining to immigrants and refugees. The 4-month suspension of the U.S. refugee program and the 90-day travel ban into the U.S. from 7 Muslim-majority nations hit home in more ways than one for a former refugee, now U.S. citizen living in Rochester. For Akil Al-Jaish, it was reading about the dream described by Martin Luther King Jr. that gave him hope when he came to the U.S. in 2001. But he fears that American dream could be vanishing. Take a look.
I flee Iraq because actually I'm not in Ba'ath Party, and at that time, if you are not in Ba'ath Party, you cannot say like I cannot get in Ba'ath Party. So that means I'm against the Ba'ath Party. So either in or no. And I escaped Iraq in 1997, and I've been tortured, tortured and imprisoned in, as you see, those 2 fingers in there. I've been there for about a year, and my father paid a lot of money to bribe the government to get me out, and since then he told me you have to leave. The day one I left Iraq, I still remember that like today. My father, I left Iraq at 4 o'clock in the morning. So nobody can see me or nobody know anything. And my father gave me a hug and tell me, wherever you go and you got your freedom, it will be your country. So I don't want to see you here. And I left. Went to school, went to MCC, and finished school here, RIT. And then I got settled and went, after I got my citizenship in 2008, went to Iraq. In fact, I went about 5 to 6, more than 6 times to Iraq. Then I met my wife in Iraq, and I brought her here. We bought a house, and we have a daughter now. So to me, anytime I leave Rochester, I feel like, oh God, I miss my home.
I'm establishing new vetting measures to keep radical Islamic terrorists out of the United States of America. We don't want them here. We only want to admit those into our country who will support our country and love deeply our people.
If this is related to the security, if this is related to the ISIS, which is he said he will delete it from the face of the earth, which is, I agree with that. I would love to see that. But tell me, Why you don't put Saudi Arabia on the list? Why you don't put United Arab Emirates in the list, which is till today, they are the biggest funder to the ISIS. Saudi Arabia, they have the 15 from Saudi Arabia was in 9/11 involved. The head of 9/11 from Saudi Arabia and Egypt. Why we don't see that? And what happened in California, it's from Pakistan. Why Pakistan in that? So is it pick and choose, or depends on, we have business with those countries, for example? It's has nothing to do with the security. On top of that, do you know how long it will take to somebody to become a refugee? The vetting process is take more, they said it's 2 years, but I have about 165 individual I deal with. None of them, his case being guaranteed in 2 years. It's taking 3-4 years. There's 18 steps to get them in. That's why we don't see any connection between those people who's running for their life has anything to do with the terrorist. I don't think the security things has nothing to do with the refugee and has nothing to do with the process of refugee. Take my family example. I came here, as you know, in 2001. I start my life, I learn English, going to school, paying taxes. In fact, I'm gonna say personal things, which is I pay $6,000 every year for my taxes for my house. All this year since I bought the house, and I'm working, my wife is working. So I met my wife in Iraq. She went through all the procedure to get here, and she's lawful resident now, but she cannot go back now. She's been here since 2013, and her father is really sick, but I cannot guarantee if she goes, she's gonna come back. We didn't do anything wrong. We came here and we start to live American dream. And we start to live as Martin Luther King said, okay? I have a dream to everybody be equal in this country. I have a dream to see all.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. Yeah. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
I feel this dream start vanishing because I left Iraq, for example. I left Iraq because when I go in the middle of Iraq, they said, he's from the south. When I go out of Iraq, they say, oh, he's Iraqi. And now I come in here and I don't want to hear that, oh, he's a Muslim. And this country great because it's bring people from all over the world, helping people. This country built in shoulder of hardworking Americans and refugee people. So look to your history. If you believe you're born in America, look to your father, look to your grandfather. And I will ask this again, who is the real American and where are they? So it's not just me, there is thousands of people, millions of people like me. I agree with okay, deporting those criminals, whatever, I agree with that. I agree, destroy Islamic State, I agree in all of that. This is my country. This is my home now. I mean, this will never go away, no matter what happened. But I confused now. Okay, so you tell me all of that, and you are Muslim. You will look at you as you are second citizen, or we could deport you at any time, It's make people confuse what to say. It's make people confused. But I believe all people who has lived here enough to know this country is not built on that. And I still believe that this will change.
It's a serious issue that continues to be a leading news topic, and it's the focus of yet another executive order by President Trump. What's the latest on cybersecurity, what you need to be aware of, and how can businesses and individuals protect themselves? Joining me to dig into this issue is Paul Robinson, Cybersecurity Solutions Advisor at Gray Castle Security. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Helen, thank you so much.
So as we look back at President Obama's tenure, in particular his legacy when it comes to cybersecurity, there are some who say he had good intentions from day one, and yet some of those same experts will say he did not deliver when it comes to making sure that the government and the private sector was more secure. And I wanted to get your take on that. Are we better off now than we were 8 years ago?
Great. So diplomatically speaking, I'll talk about that. So I got into cybersecurity when the Obama administration started, actually January of '09. So when he came into administration, there wasn't much talk about cybersecurity from a government perspective. It was just, a computer issue, technology issue, and things like that. But as the administration went on and time went on, you saw how it became something from the government. We saw some really intense hacks and breaches that took place. So, when people ask about that, I say he did a really good job as far as bringing it to the forefront and bringing it to public attention. And the one thing I found interesting this year, with as contentious as the election got, it was one thing that both sides could definitely agree upon, was that we do have a cybersecurity issue in this country, whether it's from the private sector or from the public sector as well. It's really getting dangerous out there from a cyber perspective. And
what's happened in the past 10 years? It's made us more vulnerable when it comes to the digital world.
When we talk to folks about security, it's a people issue. It's a people issue that it always comes down to, whether it's someone that's misconfigured a firewall at a company, or someone that clicks on a link and their files get encrypted from ransomware. It's really a people issue, and we move so fast. We're very quick to, jump on Facebook and, oh, this looks like an interesting article. I'll click on it, and we just keep on moving quick. Again, it's not only a technology issue at this point, it's a people issue, and getting people just to slow down and see exactly what it is that they're doing in the cyber world.
You mentioned the word ransomware, and that's a term that we hear when referencing cyberspace and cybersecurity quite a bit. I've read that it's an issue that's become more sophisticated, and some have said it could get worse this year. What is it exactly, and how does ransomware work?
Yeah, to simplistically put it, it is what it's ransom. So, usually the threat vector that it comes in through is through an email, and you click on a link, and a piece of malware, which is serious code that is running on your computer, will then start to encrypt your files. And if you're not backing things up, then you are subject to pay ransom to get them back. And this is actually, for our viewers that are out there, something that you should be aware of, because people are using storage on their computers for family pictures or videos or things of that nature. If ransomware is getting on that and encrypting that file, and you don't have that backed up, it's gone. And the only way to get it back is to work through that. Now, it's a fundamental debate of whether to pay it or not. I'm not here to advise either way, but it really causes a lot of disruption for personal use of computers and devices.
Paul, what would you say, what are some of those issues as you look at this year? Are there certain things that you're anticipating when it comes to cybersecurity issues, or that you think people need to be aware of? We talked about ransomware. Is there anything else?
Yeah, not to have doom and gloom over it, but we're getting really close to where the virtual is going to spill into the physical. There have been different incidences that have taken place that have happened that we're starting to see the physical world be impacted. I don't know if you remember, a few years ago, somebody hacked into the AP Twitter feed and said that there was an explosion at the White House and President Obama was gravely injured. And it was a 2-minute glitch that took place. In that 2 minutes, $139 billion was lost in the S&P. And that's 2 minutes. And AP was quick to fix it. They said it's fake. S&P went back up. But that's a financially impacting situation that can take place. Our grids are out there that folks would like to take down. Various different things. I don't know if there was an article that recently talked about how 70% of the CCTV cameras during the inauguration were attacked, and they were under control of hackers. So I'm not to doom and gloom, and not to fear monger here, but it's a reality that this could be the year that the physical world is greatly impacted by the virtual.
Well, to follow that up, what can be done? What can the private sector do? What can individuals do? I know there might be some differences, obviously, between the two when we look at this, but what are some of the things that can be done? Is there a way to kind of get ahead of this?
Yeah, common sense just needs to be promoted when we talk about cybersecurity and the virtual world. There's certain things that we don't do in the physical world because they're dangerous. We're like, hey, we can't walk down the street at this time because the likelihood of us getting attacked is high. Or, if I asked you in the street, hey, give me the keys to your house. Now, we just met, but you're like, I'm not going to give the keys to this guy. We're not going to do that. That common sense needs to start bleeding into the virtual world, where we have people that are giving passwords out. We have people that are getting on websites that are just really just dangerous and not safe, from a content standpoint, from a financial standpoint as well.
When you say the common sense, and Paul, are there some practical steps, some things that we should be looking out for, things that we can do to prevent that?
Sure. From a personal perspective, financials are big. Bank accounts are getting hacked all the time. You're seeing, transfers going out from your bank account that are going who knows where, and you're losing money. Check your bank account every day. If I say that if you can go on Facebook or Twitter 15, 20 times a day, get your banking app on your phone. Click on that. Make sure you're not seeing any weird transactions that are taking place, and small transactions also. Don't dismiss the $15 at something that you've never heard of before because the low and slow attacks are taking place. From a private sector, a lot of awareness needs to take place inside of organizations, and building plans and policies around cybersecurity.
I'm sorry, before we run out of time, I just want to know, in terms of our cell phones, right? How secure is that if we do check our bank statement on our cell phone? Is there a security risk in doing that?
There's a risk in everything you do online. Everything you do online, there's a risk, and but also it's important to make sure that you are you're checking those things as well.
We have to close for now, but definitely a crucial topic to be aware of and to pay attention to. Paul Robinson, Cybersecurity Solutions Advisor at Gray Castle Security. Thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate it.
And that wraps up this edition of Need to Know, Rochester's News Magazine. I'm your host, Helene Bianduti-Hofer. Thank you for joining me tonight and throughout the weekend here on WXXI TV. And thank you for supporting public broadcasting. I will see you next week.